We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Just a question of taste with you, well, you've gone sour. You want the world plus everything, but it won't work an hour. And now your questions are get creeping, and you go and buy our flowers. You throw away the dreams we had, boy. I won't allow it. I said we're gonna fall out. Let's see you get out. I think we're gonna fall out. So shut your mouth.
Good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters. It is the professionals with me, Stu and Mitch. Good evening, chaps.
Good evening.
And I'm sure we'll all be as happy as Postecoglou, who's looking at the moment after blowing a 2-goal lead. Chelsea just edging in front now, 3-2 at Spurs. We'll keep an eye on that game as the last 15 or 16 minutes ticks on. But we're here to talk about Newcastle United for the next 90 minutes. And again, another one of these shows where the atmosphere around the club is quite depressing. Mitch, you were quite notably angry last week. The Liverpool game, obviously showed a different side to Newcastle. But first half yesterday, Newcastle in the game, 2-2 at half time. Second half, same old problems, same old frailties. A lot of possession of the ball, not doing anything with it. Individual errors, giving the ball away, and not taking opportunities and conceding goals equals another defeat on the road.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting Alan Shearer's comments post-match yesterday about mentality and about as players you can't just turn up for the big games, and that seems like now what some are doing. He rattled off the list of games where we've done really, really well. And then when you compare that to the games in which we haven't done as well, and where we've made individual errors, where we seem to have switched off, I think if you take the last 15 games of last season and then add it to this season so far, in terms of wins, draws and losses, I think you've got relegation form, which is exceptionally worrying. I think the point I was going to make, Mark has just made the mentality. The mentality doesn't seem to be right. And in that is the mentality of the team a reflection of the mentality of the manager? I'm not really sure. But after West Ham, I was back, like I said to you, I was back to this sort of point where I was asking the same questions I was asking after 5-6 games. Even with the Liverpool result in there, that hasn't changed. And in fact, some ways yesterday's made it worse. I think the other thing that if we as a fan base have got to be consistent, Eddie Howe's comments yesterday, where he brought the weather up unprompted in 2 replies to questions, if that had been Steve Bruce, you know what I would be saying? Don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining. If Alan Pardew would made those comments, would have been all over Alan Pardew like a bulldog over hot chips. And you can't come out and make comments like that. Was the weather different for Brentford, was it? No. No. Could you say that it affected the defender's ability to judge the flight of the ball for the third goal, where it didn't stop the Brentford player? You just can't use that as an excuse. And then to double down on it and suggest that the cold was made it difficult for our substitutes. Well, hold on. Wasn't it the Brentford substitute who scored the fourth goal? So the cold didn't seem to matter for him. I think absolute bullshit. That's bullshit answer. And like I say, if it had been Bruce, would be hammering him. And that's one of the first times I've looked at how Eddie's handled the press and thought, ooh, not good enough. Really not good enough. We are rapidly approaching a crossroads. How rapidly only those higher up in the club can know. I think our games up to the new year now are critical for us to come out with positives from every game. I think then what happens in January, and I still stand by my thoughts, I think this suggests to me nothing will happen in January in terms of the transfer window. And that in some ways could be damning for Eddie as well. I want to sit here and say, though, it's not like I haven't got the pitchforks out. We're not at that Howe out stage, but I think we're very right to ask tough questions, to be critical where it's due. He doesn't seem to have the answers. Again, there was questions over the starting 11, questions over the substitutes again. There's definitely stuff fomenting within the fan base now, which I never, thought would be a long time before we saw that, but it's coming much more quickly than I thought it was. And yet again, my biggest problem is I can't sit and box off an answer. I feel like I just can't sit and go, it's time for Eddie to go, if I can't tell you who I would see as a replacement and how I would see that would work. Because I just can't. I can't name a name. I can't name somebody that's, out there that could come in and elevate the current squad, improve and work with the current squad, work within the PSR constraints, because anybody coming in we want to be assured of a transfer budget, particularly for January and then for the longer term. I can't think of somebody who would fit in with the structure we have with Mitchell and the setup that we have. I just can't name somebody like that. And I'm not comfortable. I think Mourinho's had his day. I don't think there's anybody out there that comes away, which boxes it off. I wouldn't want to see we'd take a chance on, say, someone like Amarin that Man United have. So I think without being able to give people an answer on where I stand about, well, what's the solution if you say Howe out, I don't think we should be headed that way, personally. That's just my take on it. But I find it very, very concerning. And I start to ask questions like, when you see we're all over the place, when you see how the players seem not to be responding in certain situations, you have to start to wonder, has he lost the dressing room a little bit?
Okay. Lots of comments coming and lots of questions. I will save a few of these for after Stu has his say, and I'm certainly going to have a say as well. Stu, go on. What's your feeling after yesterday's game?
Well, I freaked Mitch out yesterday before the game started because I said something negative on WhatsApp to him. I said, we lose this game and I'll keep it clean because I'm aware it's not after 9 o'clock in the UK. His reply was, excuse me, my dear friend, can you please tell me what you're talking about? And I said, have you seen that club video of them getting off the bus? For me, they look bored. The players, they look disinterested. They look tired. They look like there was no harmony, no collectiveness, not looking up for it. The body language to me sends up plenty of messages and none of it was positive. And for all the humming and hawing, one player I thought they missed yesterday, not for his ability, but for his leadership, was Jamal Lascelles. Because to me, too many players are getting away with putting half a shift in. And if he was on the pitch, he wouldn't allow it. And you've got your manager telling your captain to try and G the players up halfway through a game in a Premier League game. It just doesn't add up. And another thought that crossed me is, for me, 2 years ago, Champions League qualification was and probably will be the pinnacle for most of our squad's careers. And we haven't been able to move on from there. So instead of all the infighting and calling people helmets and numpties because they don't agree with your opinion, everyone's entitled to opinion. It doesn't mean they're right. But we're not the enemy. We should be showing togetherness. The enemy's the Premier League and the PSR rules, etc. But we can all be wise after the event, Steve. But the one thing that is really, really, really becoming apparent is this meek surrender in second halves is becoming too frequent now. And we'll go back to the Bournemouth game, and you can see Everton. What other games? Fulham, definitely Fulham. Brighton, I was sitting there with you where the game was there for the take, and once we're behind, we seem to become devoid of ideas. West Ham, for sure, that was the worst second half performance I've seen under Eddie Howe's tenure. Crystal Palace, and then yesterday. But look at those teams I've just mentioned. These are the teams that we should be capable of beating. We have a squad capable of beating them. And maybe if Eddie Howe's, if anything, he's protecting the players too much. It's a balancing act. And again, it's all about opinions. And mine is, my favourite phrase currently is horses for courses. I would have played Lloyd Kelly yesterday because Stevie Wonder could have seen before the game that they play with pace up front. So what we'll do is we'll play two sluggish people in the centre halves who are supposedly tired after being ran ragged by people. Make changes. Don't be scared to drop big name players or big people in the dressing room, etc. You've got to play your best team to beat the opposition. And the top players, or the supposed top players, aren't putting the extra yards in. And if you are a top player, you put the extra yards in when things aren't going well. And the midfield, time and time again, not just yesterday, but the last 18 months, has left the defence exposed. And there's no mobility in midfield. There's no legs in midfield. And I want to get this weather thing out the way because I listened to his interview, Eddie Howe's interview, and I listened to Bruno's interview. It was Bruno that was using the weather as an excuse more than Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe referenced it, but said it's not a reason. So when Bruno's mentioning weather, this, that, and the other, did he mention his teammates not putting a shift in? Did he mention his teammates down in tools? If he's going to be honest and get applauded for it, you take the claps and you take the slaps. Did he say it's unacceptable? You go, skipper. No, you didn't. You just give every excuse you want to go. And if we're on about bashing Brazilians, I suppose there's a pun in there, but if we're on about doing that, Joe Linton, how many good games has he had this season? Everyone wants to blame Eddie Howe, but me, the focus is on the players. He can't tell them to pass the ball 20 yards, 10 yards, put a tackle in, run back when you're meant to. That should be a given. And if I go back to Joe Linton, what's he, 3 or 4 games he's played well this season? How many were played? 15, 16? That's what 140 grand a week gets you now, is it? But will he be dropped? Will he be rotated? Will he be rested? No, because you don't want to upset the captain because it's his best mate. Well, if you're a captain, you perform like a captain, and I don't mean Captain Pugwash or Captain Sensible or Captain Calamity or whichever the Captain Chaos, whichever captain you can think of. A captain leads by example. And it's all right ripping into the players after the game, but for me, he's the biggest culprit because he is the captain. Imagine we're in Europe and having to play 2 games a week. What excuse you got now? Oh, they're tired because they played on Wednesday. Our whole thing is to get into Europe. The whole season's set to get into Europe to get to 2 games a week next season. What we're going to have to do, the poor Bens, they're going to give them a comfort room so they can lie down. It's pathetic, the excuses that they're given that they're tired. With the pitches are nigh on perfect. They're playing like pamper prima donnas. And for me, the frustration, more than anything else, it's not the Liverpool games or the Man City games. And it's great watching them. And I love watching the social media critics were quiet after the Liverpool game. But for me, and I stress for me, European football is not won or lost on drawing against Liverpool or beating Arsenal. It's won or lost by beating Brentford away, by beating Crystal Palace away, by beating Everton away, by beating Brighton at home, by beating West Ham at home. That's how we get into Europe. We can afford to lose a draw against the top sides. But the points that we've dropped it's not European football performance. And if Eddie Howe is to stay, if he's to stay, he has to show he's in charge and make the big in-game decisions regarding certain players. Otherwise, his blind loyalty will be the sword he falls on. And I hate to say it because everyone who's watched this since the day he walked through a door, even before that, both Mitch and myself were huge advocates of Eddie Howe's appointment. And I still believe he's the right man to take us through. But I'm starting to think that this is playing out perfectly upstairs. And I don't mean the swimming pool. I mean in the corridors of power at St. James. He wasn't supported for the last 2 windows. And it's roughly the same squad that got us a Champions League qualification. But as I mentioned, these players, excuse me, were out there. That was their highlight of their career. They probably haven't even dreamed of being able to do what they did. And they did it. And I don't want to name the players, but I think we all know them, the squad fillers, but we're not able to rotate them. But if we're not able to add to it, and I mentioned it last week, he's a manager, not a magician. And maybe it has gone stale. Maybe these players did peak. Maybe they are on the downward slide, but he's not getting any help. And we all know that he's, in the eyes of Darren Eales, and I'll say reputedly for the channel, that he's, Eddie Howe is seen as Amanda's boy. And that doesn't sit well with him. We all know that Paul Mitchell likes to put his stamp on the club and probably had his own manager to come in mind. But Eddie's stock was far too high in the summer. There would have been a huge backlash from the whole fan base if they tried to eke him out then. So what they've done is make it uncomfortable and not allow him to progress while everyone else is progressing. And I'm not defending Eddie because he's not infallible. He will make mistakes, but he hasn't been helped. And that for me is criminal from a club that is meant to be moving forward, for a club that's meant to be taking this Premier League by storm and then conquering Europe all within 5 to 10 years. They're not helping them at all. So what happens now then? You get rid of them. Name me a top manager that's going to come in with no money. Not one of them. Name me a top manager, because there was a group that me and Mitch are on, and you've got experts. I've probably been to more games since I've lived in Bahrain than they've been to in their lifetime, telling me that Eddie Howe needs to go. Okay, get someone in. And then they were talking about managers that were already in jobs. Well, that'll cost money. We could buy a player with that money, because you don't just buy the manager. You pay compensation. You've got to buy his second in charge. You've got to buy his physio. You've got to buy his psychologist. You've got to buy probably about 7 or 8 people that come in. That would be the price of a player. So if I was Eddie Howe, I'd be calling the meeting tomorrow morning and saying, back me or sack me. Put it on their toes, because he hasn't been getting the help. And every decision he makes now is being magnified by an over-eager fan base that want instant success. And it is, if we're mentioning the weather, a lot of it is from fair weather supporters. Because, and I know I mentioned it, I don't want to sound over positive because I'm not. The tone of my voice tells you I'm not. But for how long have we been watching this game, this team? And this team now is comfortably one of the best teams we've seen. Yeah, we know we're underachieving, but we're not being allowed to achieve. And Eddie Howe is the easy target. I will say this in defence of him: just be careful what you wish for, because for me, I think with the right tools, he needs to be given a chance. Whether he'll succeed or not, I don't know. But he's shown that he can succeed. Every time he's been backed, he's brought further success. Now, is it bunts? There's no injuries now, but the players aren't as fit because they have never flagged like that they do in the second half as they have done this season. And this, if anyone's tuned into this programme for answers, I'm sorry you're going to be disappointed, but you'll get a lot more questions. And for me, the valid questions, one thing that needs to stop is this infighting, this criticising each other, because that just plays right in the Premier League hands, and it makes us sound like entitled Man United fans, entitled Tottenham fans, and entitled Arsenal fans, and we're not. We're Newcastle United, and we should be better than this. Have a difference of opinion, accept other people have a different opinion, but don't start criticising or personally insulting them for having that opinion. And this is, for me, the saddest thing of what's happening at the moment. Where does this entitlement come from? Where in our lifetime have we won anything? So how come all of a sudden we should be winning? We have to be winning. We don't. There's another 10 teams in the league that all think the same. So that's me little rant over. I just thought I'd get it off my chest. And over to you, Steve, for your turn.
God, I mean, look, it's such a a strange situation to be in. I think our problem started, and I'm going to probably nitpick some of the best things that have been in the chat, because a lot of my argument has been mentioned by numerous people in there today. Our problems did start when we finished, in the Champions League positions and went on that Champions League journey, because that was way ahead of schedule. And that probably to a degree backed up what Amanda had said when she first came in, that Newcastle would win something, and this is where it would be. And then of course the documentary with Yasser, basically saying that he wanted to be number one. That kind of thing for a fan, young or old, is exciting, because it's something that we haven't had, especially after 14 years of Ashley. It's something that we've not seen. We've been used to being, the bridesmaid, never the bride. We've been used to, being below what we felt we should have been, after the Entertainers years, and Bobby Robson. We've had a succession of bang average managers and a couple of poor managers. And, we've even been relegated a couple of times and got promoted at the first attempt. So from our perspective, I think depending on depending how old you are, unless you're Mitch's dad's age, many of us have never seen us win anything. We've seen plenty finals, we've seen semi-finals, but we're used to not winning anything. That isn't the issue. We know that. But getting on to Eddie, and then I'll look at the game. Eddie Howe's come in. He wasn't my first choice. I would have preferred a more experienced manager. I've told this story before, but the day after the takeover, I went down to the Jesmond Hotel to meet my dad and Amanda, and Eddie Howe had already approached Newcastle. He put his CV in. He wanted to come to Newcastle. He's now come out and admitted, that Celtic was an option, didn't fancy it, couldn't take his team in, but Newcastle's where he ended up. And we all know now that he, again, confirmed something we spoke about on here when it happened, that he wasn't first choice for Newcastle. So ultimately, we've learned a hell of a lot over the course of the last few years. We've seen the great escape with Eddie. We've seen the wonderful season which got us into Europe, and then we've seen a season full of injuries where he almost qualified for Europe and got us, just missed out by the skin of his teeth. But ultimately, with all of those injuries, he still did very well. So the optimism for this season was there for all to see. Going into the transfer window, we were all expecting something great. We didn't see the Dan Ashworth situation. I'm sure we'll come on to him later. But Dan Ashworth's situation developed, gardening leave, then meaning that we had to wait for the new person to come into his position. That didn't help. And again, I'll reiterate what we've mentioned on previous podcasts. Turmoil at the top, losing Amanda, losing Mirdad, and then the changes, the big changes in the dressing room, which is where ultimately it counts, and that is bringing in Bunce, to try and change things. Now that has to have an effect on Eddie Howe. We know that he's got a very close knit set of people at that training ground. He relies heavily on Jason Tyndall, best friends, of course. Formed a very strong relationship with Graham Jones, but bringing somebody else in who will have potentially spotted something that he maybe doesn't like in Howe's training methods or the rest of the lads' training methods, and that's almost like putting a cuckoo in the nest, and that I don't think will have helped Newcastle at all. So I think a lot of our problems, I personally think a lot of our problems, and again, this is only my opinion, potentially stem from that. There have been things maybe that have changed behind the scenes which Eddie isn't happy with. And if he's not happy with it, then that is going to filter down to the players. Chuck into the mix, of course, the players are getting a year older. It does make a difference. Also chuck into the mix that when Amanda and my dad left, and again, we've said it on here, they were the people, the likes of Bruno, the likes of Gordon, for example, they trusted Amanda and Mirdad. They were sold the dream by Amanda and Mirdad. They were the ones who picked the phone up and made the initial contact, did the deal, and then welcomed them to the club. And the love and affection that those players had for Amanda and Mirdad was quite clear for us to see. I mean, you just need to go back to the more walking around the pitch at the end of the season, and just the relationship they've got. It was something complete. It was completely, a loving, and for them to go and for them to lose that connection and then to be replaced by, new people. You have to build up a relationship, and that's not happened. It's quite clear that's not happened. We've seen a lot of the new people. We've seen a lot of Darren Eales, and we've seen a lot of Silverstone, and of course they've just been on at the stack, to an invited group of lucky supporters who've gone along and listened to what they had to say. But ultimately, all of these changes have definitely affected things. I've been lucky. I've been to every game at St James. I've been to numerous away games this season. I've seen both sides of Newcastle United. I've seen a Newcastle United that puts a lot of effort in, a lot of runs himself into the ground, does the high press, and scores goals and wins games. I've also seen the Newcastle United that basically gets depressed. Okay, Dave, I see you coming. Don't be pedantic. It wasn't an invited group. It was a ballot. Okay, I'll make an apology. But from my perspective, I just think that was always going to change things. It was always going to change things. Not having that kind of connection with those people was always going to affect the players. Then moving forward, you have Mitchell come in. Now that comes in the middle of the transfer window, and in the transfer window, Mitchell is we're supposedly going for Mark Gahey. We'll have this backwards and forwards. The press are hyping it up. We don't get him. And we ultimately don't get this big signing that we're all expecting. And that created this horrendous atmosphere at the start of the season. Getting to the games that I mentioned, though, we've really had some great games and some poor games. And when you look at the Premier League, watching that game today, Spurs score again, 4-3 to Chelsea. We're very Spursy. Chelsea have won that game now, anyway, by the way, that's a full time. We are very Spursy. We're a team that essentially you don't know which team is going to turn up. And we had that wonderful game midweek against Liverpool, which we should all still be celebrating and talking about and, patting Eddie Howe and the players on the back for. A game we could have won easily had the referee given us that extra 2 minutes that we should have had. But we didn't. Obviously, we drew 3-3. But then we go to Brentford and we have a game of two halves. And it was a game of two halves. Yes, it was windy. Yes, it was raining. And yes, it was the same for both teams. And yes, it was mentioned by Eddie Howe and it was mentioned by Bruno. I do agree with Ches in the chat. I do believe that, it was taken out of context by a lot of the people who were talking about it. The press who've said he's blaming the weather, and then that becomes a thing on social media. Because Eddie did say it was the same for both teams. He realised quickly what he'd said, I think. Thought, hold on, you could see him almost communicating to himself. That's gonna be used against us. So he made sure that he mentioned it was the same for both teams. We can't use that as an excuse. I didn't hear Bruno mention it, so the interview I saw didn't include that. But if he did, fair enough. But let's remember, it was a game of two halves. The first half, Sean Longstaff at the bar. Isaac should have made it 2. Wonderful goalkeeping save. Normally a keeper would never have that second opportunity, and he managed to get it. Newcastle should have been 4-2 up in that first half, but they weren't. In the second half, it was poor. It was abysmal, and it was schoolboy errors again. Schoolboy errors. Poor mistakes, and a lack of effort. And that's the thing that was unforgivable yesterday. And does that come with tiredness? Does that come with lack of discipline? Does that come because Eddie Howe's not doing his job properly? I genuinely think it comes because partly what Stu said. We've got prima donnas. Really, we do have all footballers. I think nowadays are prima donnas. They all have wages which ultimately are beyond our wildest dreams, and those people playing in the Premier League more than anybody else. And for me, it just seems it seems incredible that we play as well as we do against Liverpool on Wednesday, but then we put a performance like that in against Brentford. Having said that, this isn't Brentford who's just got promoted. This is also a Brentford team that is and has the best home record in the Premier League this season. And yes, there's a bit of an arrogance amongst Newcastle fans, especially when we gave it the build-up that we did. Stats were there. We'd never lost we never lost a Premier League game down there. But there again, we haven't played many Premier League games down there. But we played a team that going into the game had scored 22 league goals at home and had won 9 out of 9 at home in league and cup. So from our perspective, it was a tough game, and we gave it a shot. We had a goal. Now, I think Eddie Howe was probably screwed whether he went for it or he didn't go for it. He didn't go for it at Crystal Palace, and we came away with a point when we should have had all 3. Okay, we might not have deserved it, but with the last-minute goal that denied us getting all 3 points at Crystal Palace. At Brentford, we decided to go toe-to-toe with a team that's murdering people at home, and we've come a cropper, and we've lost 4-2. Should he have started Tonali? Should he have started Gordon? I think he should have. I think that was a mistake on his behalf. I think that if those 2 players are good enough to be on the bench, those 2 players are good enough to start, and if they get tired, to come off. I didn't understand why he would change this team. I really didn't understand that. And I think that was his big mistake. He might think that he sees something in training and he thinks that this is the way forward and this is what we should do. But me personally, I think he should have started them. And I think we would have had a better chance of getting 3 points and maybe nullifying the threat that Brentford posed. But I am certainly not Howe out. And I get the point that Mitch has made. If this was Steve Bruce or if this was Alan Pardew, you'd be giving them pelters. Yeah, I would have been. Because you know what? I didn't see performances like I saw that Liverpool game with Steve Bruce. Probably had 1-2 games that I can think of out of Steve Bruce's managerial career on Tyneside where I can say, actually, that was out of the ordinary for a Steve Bruce team. It was an exciting game and they gave him the all. Pardew, I wasn't Pardew out. I didn't want Pardew out. I thought he was the best manager under Mike Ashley because he was doing what Mike Ashley wanted him to do. And he got his European football as well. But a lot of people went Pardew out. I didn't. And again, it was better the devil you know. So where are we with Eddie Howe as far as I'm concerned? We've got a manager who has, again, for me, still got credit in the bank. He's not above criticism. And I think ultimately no manager is because the club is bigger than any player or any manager or any owner. The fans are the one thing that will always be there. But for me personally, I genuinely feel that Eddie Howe still has credit in the bank and still deserves to be Newcastle United manager. Will he still be manager by the end of the season? Is $1 million question. I think the next 4 games are pivotal in Eddie's managerial time at Newcastle. And I think if Newcastle do play against Leicester next week and put in a Brighton type of performance or a West Ham type of performance and end up losing, I think Eddie's, the knives will certainly be out. And then we play Brentford, of course, on the Wednesday night in the Cup. And I think if we go out of the Cup on that Wednesday night, I think everybody will be overhyped. It doesn't bear thinking about because the Christmas period, you're going into a dangerous time. And we're now starting to see lots of managers' jobs come under threat. Postecoglou today, 2-0 up, loses 4-3. We've got the El Sakio, as people are naming it, tomorrow night. West Ham obviously play against who is it tomorrow night? They've got the Wolves, the 2 managers who are both under threat. So, you've got a merry-go-round about to start, and I think that the owners will be looking at this and saying, well, we're not getting where we want to get to. Maybe we should make this decision before the end of the season. I think if he does get through, when we do manage to get through to a semi-final and dare say at a final, I still feel we could win the Carabao Cup if Eddie's given the opportunity. We need a bit of luck, of course, but I still think we could get to the final and still potentially get that monkey off our back. But I just think that by the end of the season, if we haven't won a trophy and we haven't qualified for Europe, I think Eddie's time will be up. I think the owners would probably like to give him the opportunity to stay at the end of the season and do that. But then, as Stu mentioned before, where are we at with a manager then? Where are we at? Because PSR doesn't go away just because you change the man at the top. It's still there. And you have to say to somebody who comes in, okay, we've managed to manage our finances a little bit better than most. You're going to have some money to spend in your first transfer window, maybe your second transfer window. But after that, you're going to have to sell to buy. It really is such a strange scenario. And only Newcastle United could have such bad luck. Have 14 years with an owner who's a billionaire, who doesn't want to spend his money, and then get a takeover with the people who potentially could make you one of the richest teams, if not the richest team in the world, and you can't spend the money you should be allowed to spend because of the rules and regulations. Typical Newcastle. Typical of our luck. That's it, really. I can't say any more. In summing up, I just really want Eddie Howe to stay and get the opportunity. Completely agree with what Stu says about the demeanour of the players. You know, it's looked like that for a few weeks now. Certainly, some of these players don't seem to be happy, and where we'll go from here is up to PIF, and of course, I don't think Eddie has much of a say in that. You know, I really don't. And some of the questions that are coming in, Lee's question, how much credit does Stu and Mitch think Eddie has left in the bank before a change? Myself, I hope to give him to the end of the season. Well, you haven't really crossed this bridge, Mitch, so I'll come back to you and Stu now. I think that these next 4 games are pivotal. I'll just reiterate what I've said. I think the next 4 games are pivotal. I think that, you know, a selection of bad results over the next 4 could see him lose his job. But I feel, you know, if he does okay, gets us through to the semi-finals, of course, which played next year, I think he'll go to the end of the season, and then I think there may be some tough talking. What about you? Hypothetically, your opinion, mate?
Well, ultimately, it's not up to me. It's up to PIF. It's up to the owners about what they want to do. And more than anything, we need to see maybe a little bit more leadership from there. There's still some question marks over who's actually making some of the day-to-day decisions at Newcastle United. Yes, His Excellency Yasser Rumayyan makes a fantastic chairman and figurehead, but how hands-on is he in terms of decisions? And if it's not him, who is it? We have this figure of Jacobo Solis in the background, constantly mentioned as being key to some of the direction that Newcastle United go in. He's PAF's European Investments Manager or something similar to that. Where are the decisions being made? How are they being made? And who drives that? And who's involved with all of that? That's one of my questions. Because in terms of, for me, how much credit does Eddie have in the bank? He still has. Certainly, for me, he deserves to get to the end of the season. Do I think that'll happen? Given the run of form we're on, if that doesn't uptick through the rest of December, taking him to the end of the season mightn't be a clever idea. It's a real concern because our form is poor. There's no doubt about that. You shouldn't be going away anywhere and scoring 2 goals and losing, and not at least coming away with a point. Equally, scoring 3 goals at home, even though it's against the Liverpool team flying high, to come away with a point, it's all not good enough. It personally, with me, he still has something in the bank, but like I say, I'm not making the decisions. And one of my other ongoing concerns is leadership, top to bottom. Who was driving it? Who's making the decisions? And I cannot give you an answer to that either.
Stu, your opinion on Eddie's position then? I mean, he's still got credit in the bank for you?
Can we not talk about stadiums instead?
Or tickets?
There's not many shouting for a 90 or 100,000 stadium at the minute, is there? See, has he got credit in the bank for me? Absolutely. And we've mentioned probably 10 or 15 different reasons or suggestions of why things aren't going the way we'd all like them to go. And that's something we have to remember. We all want a good Newcastle. We all want a successful Newcastle United. But the more I think about it, I go back to nearly a year ago when Darren Eales came out with everyone's for sale. Imagine you've been sold the dream. The players that you mentioned before, sold that dream by Amanda. We're going places. We are the new kids on the block. And all of a sudden they're saying, well, you're not the lead singer. We're going to get shot. We're going to get someone else in. You're for sale. So even then, they had the trials and tribulations of Gordon going. They managed to settle Bruno down with a contract. They managed to settle Joe Linton down with a contract. Gordon was next. And then all of a sudden he thinks he's going. And as we know, they're all pampered. They need to feel loved. Now, that if you're in that team, you think, well, everyone's irreplaceable. They had a band of brothers of togetherness. And that's been challenged. I don't think it was done on purpose, but it's been challenged by someone with a bit of inexperience or naivety trying to, I suppose, play to the crowd. But for me, Eddie Howe's had to steer us through difficult waters, and he's done it before, and I've got every confidence he can do it again. But he really does need backing, because we can have the best social media team, we can have the best financial operator, we can have the best of everything, but if we haven't got the best team or the best manager, then we're not going to be best at anything. And I keep relating it back to my job, selling properties. There's a huge company that I work for, and I'm talking a huge company. Mitch is fully aware of who the owner is, etc. But he keeps things very simple. It's down to construction and sales. Everyone else is construction support, sales support. So for me, if I'm selling the properties, they're not getting to build them. And if they're not building the properties, we've got nothing to sell. So everyone else with their apparent egos of, I'm head of this department, I'm head of that department, you have to understand, without these two things, the whole business doesn't work. And without a successful Newcastle United football team, it doesn't matter what you've got off the pitch. But I'm trying my best not to apportion blame or point finger, but there seems to be a lack of leadership off the pitch, and it's a shame. It's really sad what's happened with Darren Eales and his health. But where is the decisiveness of his replacement? Where is the sponsorships? Now, there's something that Eddie Howe referred to in his press conference regarding sponsorships. He said that we need them. Hopefully things will change. Maybe they are waiting for the Man City case to be answered before they go gung-ho with the incomings, the APT ones I'm talking about, not the 115 charges. That should be out. And I can see, spitefully, the Premier League delaying that until after the January window is closed, which will just stifle us that little window to cause that little bit more unrest. And I don't want to get down to a big conspiracy theory, and I want to get back to the question you asked me, does Eddie Howe have credit at the bank? For me, he can have as much overdraft as he wants, because we all went in at that season when he took over expecting relegation, and everything was seen beforehand pointing to that. Now, I know you get people that will say, oh, you spent 400 odd million. He's done that in 6 or 7 windows. It's averaged about 60 or 70 million a window. That's one player Man City or Liverpool or Man United can buy per window. We had, and I know Keith's in the chat, and I remember watching in Amigos when the takeover happened, how many players would he change from that squad? I think Keith got up to 16. We haven't been able to change half of that to improve the team. So sometimes I think we have to lower our own expectations. It's something we don't want to do, because we all come in on the crest of a wave and wanted the success. We've craved it. We've wanted it so much. But I think we have to then start tempering our expectations and think, right, until we're allowed to compete, we have to accept we will be inconsistent. That's the only consistent thing we've got is our inconsistency. And if there is a criticism of Eddie Howe, and I mentioned it in my first spiel, was I think sometimes he's too loyal to players, which can then alienate some of the squad. Think, well, it doesn't matter if I play well or not. I'm not going to get another chance because as soon as I play back, he's straight in the team. And if you talk about resting players, and I said it before, you should have rested at least one of the centre-halves because they've conceded now 7 goals in 2 games. And for all the bravado against Liverpool, conceding 3 games at home is not going to win you many. Conceding 4 goals away from home is going to win you nothing. So for the defence that have done so well to a point, if things need changing, he's got to have the cojones to change them. But for me, Eddie Howe is the best manager for Newcastle United, and long way to continue, and hopefully he gets the opportunity. And I want to see him. I wrote it in one of the fanzines, Steve. I think it's the one that's not the first one. I want to see him at Wembley stare up as our captain lifts the cup with the black and white ribbons hanging off it, because he deserves that. So maybe that's made me misty-eyed and everything else like that, but Eddie Howe deserves the opportunity, and he deserves backing more than anything else. He deserves backing. He's not a magician.
No, definitely not. Halfway through the show, 1,000 watching lives, got 400 watching on Twitter tonight. Thanks. If you want to jump over onto YouTube, hit the subscribe button. NUFC Matters. We do 7 shows a week.
A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. Find them at their website, skipsandbins.com. Contact them, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at their website, mrvickys.co.uk. Email info@mrvickys.co.uk. Telephone 01768 210 102. A big thanks to United Group Travel, who are our fanzine sponsors. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. 2 crew driver and courier, a local family company, 3-star plus quality hotels and no interchanges. All excursions included. Website is www.unitedgrouptravel.com. Email beverly.ugtl@gmail.com. Telephone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. They are the Travel and Tourism Award winners 2024. A big thanks to Media Arts for all the technical side of things. You can find them at media-arts.co.uk. And a big thanks to Sport Social. You can find them at sport-social.co.uk, where we are now available as an audio podcast. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. If you want to help the channel, then please hit the subscribe button under this video today. Hit the thumb up to like the channel and click share to share to your other social media. We've got a few events coming up in the run-up to Christmas and after New Year. The NUFC Matters Christmas party takes place at Tyneside Irish Centre in aid of Newcastle's Cat and Dog Shelter. Tickets are £10 from newcastlelegends.com. The event takes place Saturday the 28th of December, 7 to 11, and our special guests are Nobby Solano and Joe Allen. The Long Sands will be at the Clooney in aid of the Newcastle Cat and Dog Shelter. Tickets are from the Clooney themselves or newcastlelegends.com, and tickets are priced at £15. Peter Beardsley will be at the Irish Centre, and that is on the 10th of January. Doors are 7 o'clock, and tickets are from newcastlelegends.com. You can also buy some tickets for that event at Woucher. And there is an evening with the entertainers on the 24th of January 2025. Box office is 0191 243 1171 or the website Tyne Theatre and Opera House.uk for tickets. And Lee Clark is at the Gateshead Leisure Centre on the 31st of January. You can contact Gateshead Leisure Centre direct for those tickets. Don't forget as well, Will Scott's book on the entertainers is selling well and is available from newcastlelegends.com or from the back page shops in Newcastle and the Metro Centre, and from Amazon.
Okay, welcome back to the show. The lads are on their way, I'm sure. Stu likes to have a quick break. There's Mitch. Where's the Stu? Both of them off the screen. Yes, Mark, you are right. He says, have you noticed this show always has more live views in troubled times than when we're flying? What does that tell you about us? Passionate, love and moan, more than a gloat. Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah, you are right, mate. You are right. And Ches says, Mark, I think it means this channel can be trusted, not let their emotions run away with them. Always balanced and reasonable. Thank you very much. And Kev says, I think it's collective therapy session. Yes, I think you're right. Digital Paint with Mark as well says, I don't watch as many shows when things are going well, to be honest. I just enjoy the time and have nothing much to add. When things are going wrong, it's more interesting. It certainly is. And rival fans tuning in with their popcorn too, says Blue Little Boy. I did get a question that was inboxed to us on X. This was from Paul. He says, question for you and the lads on the professional, Steve. Do you think the fitness coach Bunce has had an effect on the squad's fitness levels? Howe does rate him, and we have a reduced injury list, but are we lacking fitness over 90 minutes? And I think that ties in a little bit as well with the question that I got from Scott in the chat. He says, why do the players seem to be lethargic or unmotivated to try and win some games? Only when PSR is being kicked into touch would we know how good Eddie Howe is. Do you think you'll get that time? So we'll ignore the second part of the question, Scott, because we've addressed that in the first half. But this Bun situation, which I chucked into my views, really, I mean, it is a change, and it's a big change, that, Neil, behind the scenes. Do you think that's going to play its part?
No. Sorry.
You don't?
No.
You don't?
No, this is mentality. This isn't physicality. It's mental. I think it's all in the head.
All right.
It's attitude and how you deliver. We were playing 2 games, sometimes 3 games in a week when we were in the Champions League. And yes, we picked up injuries. Yes, the squad could have been managed better in that case. But they were quite happy to play those. In fact, they all gave interviews saying that was what they wanted, but they found it difficult. And what they found difficult was the mental side of it. This is still mentality. They're playing fewer games. We shouldn't need to be worrying about managing minutes because we're not playing Champions League games. An appointment to somebody like Bunce is to cope with, as we grow and get better and evolve, to then start to cope with those weeks. Right now, I don't think it's anything to do with him. I think it's everything to do with mentality and how the players are and are not engaged. Half-time came at just the wrong time for us yesterday. At the end of the day, we should have been ahead at half-time. We didn't take some chances. There was a couple of chances, particularly that one that Isaac dwelled on the ball too long after he'd gone round the keeper and allowed the keeper to come back. That's mentality too. And it's all application and in the head, not the physical side of it for me, mate.
Would you agree, Stu? I mean, there was that period yesterday where, Sean Longstaff and Isaac were pushing on. Alan Shearer highlighted it on Match of the Day last night. Nobody else was pushing forward. Nobody was, pressing. And, Longstaff turned around and just put his arms up as if to say, where on earth are you?
Well, I concur with my learned friend. I don't think it is down to anything else but mentality. You have some players thinking they're better than what they are. You've got some thinking, should I be here next season? I'm not putting up with these. I was sold a Ferrari and got a Fiat. I've got some people thinking, well, I should have been sold, or I'm going to get sold, or I'm not going to be in the team. There's a lot of mental mind games going on, and ultimately it's just excuses. Don't tell me that the professional footballers, irrespective of the salaries, aren't capable of running for 90 minutes twice a week, because it's been done for the last 100 plus years, and some of them had diets like I've got and still managed to do it. So these now are super fit athletes, and it's down to the desire to do it, the willingness to do it, and that has to be questioned by certain people. And I think I've highlighted enough in my opening gambit of who is culpable and who's not. But we have one genuine world class player in our team, and he scores the goals for us. Yes, he should have scored that. He did too much. I think he thought he was Peter Beardsley against Portsmouth, and that should have been a goal. And then we're ahead. Would we have lost the game? I don't know. But one of the first things I said, Steve, when the show opened was, it's becoming too consistent now, this falling away the last 30 minutes, and it's not fitness, because they can do it. And if these people have got aspirations to get into Europe, they'll have to do it anyway. So for me, it is mental, and I'm fully in agreement with Mitch. They've got to want to do it. And you could point the finger at the manager and that's up to him, etc., etc. We don't really know what goes on behind the scenes. And is there a division or divisions in the camp? Is there little sections splitting away? Is there certain groups? Irrespective, they all tell us that they love representing Newcastle United. Well, now is the time for them to prove it, because for me, they've got 4 games leading up to Christmas, including the Boxing Day game, and they should win them all. And can you see Newcastle United winning 4 games in a row this season? No. But these 4 games will be critical before we get to Man United at the end of the year. And if we're not capable of beating Man United, when teams like Forest, who we went and embarrassed on their ground, which was one of the highlights of our season, that shouldn't be, I mean, it shouldn't be a highlight of our season, but it has been so far. We should be going to these teams with no fear. We should be going to Brentford, we should be going to Crystal Palace. And the old adage is, win the battles, then you win the war. Some people aren't willing to roll their sleeves up and expect them to happen. Well, I'm sorry, you've got to make it happen. And if it's cold and it's wet and it's blowing a hoolie, that's when you show your character. That's when you put the extra yards in. That's when you roll your sleeves up and you go for it and say, we are not getting beat today. And that's when you have not just Sean Longstaff, not just Isaac. You have people who are willing to do something for half the game, but not the other half of the game. Take them off at half time. Take them off early. Whatever happens is you've got to have people who are committed to this cause, and then the talent. Because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not applying it properly, you look at Tottenham, they're just as bad as us. Winning one game, lose the next, win one game, lose the next. But when they win well. When we win, we're winning, fortunately. And yet they're not that far ahead of us in the league. I think it's one position, depending on what's happened today. We've been getting away with this season. And one thing that shouldn't be levelled at any Newcastle team is lack of application. And that's my biggest concern this season. If they'd applied themselves properly and went for it and give their all, we would be sitting comfortably in the top 6. I genuinely believe that. And that everyone can blame Eddie Howe for that. You can blame the coach and staff. But when you see players not being able to pass the ball to each other, or they lose the ball and throw the arms in the air like they're Ronaldo, well, I'm sorry, you're not. If you make a mistake, you go and rectify it. And to be fair to Harvey Barnes, he conceded the second goal. His wayward pass lost us that second goal. At least he scored one to get it back, you know what I mean? But we shouldn't be chasing games, and maybe I'm now guilty of sounding that elitist, we're better than them, but ability-wise we are. So if we're not winning the games and we've got more ability, then it is down to attitude. So I can't disagree with Mitch at all.
I think something that is just sort of come to mind when I've been listening to you guys, and I think the appointments of both Mitchell and Bunce, the timing of them, hasn't helped them at all. When they come in the middle of all that furore, when I was watching the game in UBK after, I can't remember which game it was reasonably early in the season, maybe 3 or 4 games in, and somebody was saying, "Oh, Bunce has taken all the energy out of this team." You're like, hang on a minute, he's not even been in position a month. He can't have had that much influence. And then about 2 weeks later, this is all Mitchell's fault. So he's been in 6 weeks and he's had very little involvement with the transfer window and any planning. But the way there was so much turmoil in the summer and the timing of their appointments means in some ways the clubs chucked them under the bus a little bit, because it's almost like anything that was going to go right was going to be on Eddie Howe, and anything that goes wrong is on somebody else. And I think we've got to look at the much bigger picture. Like I say, I think the Bunce appointment was about planning ahead for having 2 to 3 games a week on a regular basis, and that's when you need somebody like that to help manage minutes. We don't need that right now. What we need is somebody who's got them set up right in their head, and they're all over the place.
Yeah, certainly are. Let's get through a couple of other questions. Mitch, question for Mitch away from the football. Who's going to win the Super Bowl? I'm saying the Eagles, says James.
Well, everybody knows I'm a Chiefs fan, and I'd be very happy for a three-peat.
There we go.
And I wouldn't put it past them either, because they're playing really badly, and yet they're still winning games.
I'll say Detroit Lions. There you go.
Paul Charlton, he says, I've never known the NUFC fan base more divided at the minute. It's toxic and online these days. It is, mate, but I've known it.
I've known it much more divided than this.
Yeah, and we've
been at the centre most of it, Steve.
Exactly. Just keep offline. If you want an honest opinion, go and see your mates in the pub and or sit and watch us. And it's an honest debate. We don't agree all the time. Do you think it might be a tactics issue, with regards to the way things are, rather than fitness, then, Mitch?
Some of it. Again, what I pointed out, that comedy cuts moment on 70 minutes against West Ham when he made those substitutions, and nobody had an absolute clue what they were doing on the pitch for the following 10 minutes. You can't tell me that was... that had ever been used in training, or that was planned in any way, shape or form, because it just wasn't. They didn't have an effing clue what they were doing on the bloody pitch. Tactics to a point has Eddie been found out? Well, again, we've said this time and again, we struggle to unlock low blocks. We struggle to, in certain situations, when teams set up a certain way, and we don't seem to have somebody who can pick a lock and make a difference during a game. We don't seem to have a plan B other than rotate players within the system, and that doesn't seem to be working anymore. And again, I come back to Eddie's answers post-match. Increasingly, he's coming across as frustrated, coming across as almost saying, like, well, I don't know how this is working and why it's not working. He's almost said that 2 or 3 times. That concerns me.
Yeah, I think what he's trying to not do, Mitch, is throw the players under the bus. And I'm sure he is, give them a rollicking behind the scenes. But we're all of a certain age and watching enough football to know what we've seen. And so some people take it personally, think that Eddie Howe's lied through his TV screen to that person. He hasn't. What he is doing, he's been political. If you study Eddie Howe, which obviously I have to study people, for me, he's a shy person. You can see when he laughs, he's nervous when he laughs. But he's managed to master the press conferences and stuff like that. He's comfortable doing that. But the after match things, whether we win or lose, he doesn't want to give anything away. He's always guarded. So I don't read too much what he says after the match, because he's very, very conscious of not giving a negative response, even when he really wants to. I'm sure if he said what he really wanted to, then what sort of manager does that? Not successful. But you can protect the team too long. I think he has to get to a stage. Hopefully, we never see performances like we have recently again. But it's not. You wouldn't bet against it, where he can't keep defending them. He's going to say, I've given them the plan, and it wasn't carried out. I will make changes, and I think that would galvanise the fan base. That would gain him more support. But thankfully for us, he's not bothered about us sitting on here talking about him, people commenting about him. He's bothered about making Newcastle United successful, and if his idea is, I'll protect them publicly, but I'll bollock them privately. Then fair play to him. You know, more grease to his elbow. That's what he wants to do. But the results have to then testify that attitude. And I don't want to be constantly repeating myself in this program, but I think he's been let down by his big players, his big game players, big name players. That a lot of them, in fact, all of them, can't say they've been consistent this season. Who has been our most consistent player? And I can guarantee you can, whoever you say, I can say straight away 3 games they haven't played well in. At least 3 games, which is a quarter of the games we've played. So that's where we're at. We're not getting any level of consistency. Yet someone has one good game and they think, well, that does me for 4 or 5 games. We'll achieve nothing with that attitude. And that's the players, because maybe they're reading the papers. Maybe they know my job's safe because they can't bring loads of people in. So it doesn't matter. And I'm better than that person sitting next to me in the change room, so I'm still going to get picked. And I go back to another thing I said was, who is our real enemy? And that's the thing that needs to be burst before we can even progress.
Okay, let's change direction slightly, and it's a question from yes, Tom. There it is. What's your thoughts on Dan Ashworth leaving his role as sporting director at Manchester United after just 5 months, Mitch?
There's a man who has taken his reputation and turned it into one of the biggest bonfires in football. And add to that some of the decisions he's been involved with in other sports. Prior to that, he was one of the biggest advocates for the 100 competition, for example, in cricket. He piggybacked on the good work of people at Brighton and came out looking far better than he ever was. What was the point of trashing your time at Newcastle United? You've been at Man United for just under, I think, a handful of days fewer than he was on gardening leave. And it's quite clear that the managerial appointment at Man United he wasn't involved in, wasn't his man. And he's now, the toys have come out of the cot. Mutual decision, that's football speak for he was sacked. And I'll be interested to see what comes out of that. Fascinating how somebody can trash their entire world with some stupid and selfish decisions. I'm not gloating about it from a Newcastle United point of view, because the situation with him was also added into a summer of discomfort and turmoil. Ridiculous, really. So to claim it as a victory, it would feel like a very Pyrrhic one, if you ask me. I'm hearing that he's being lined up for the next series of Gardener's Question Time on the BBC, because I think that's where he belongs. I cannot see how anybody with credibility would want to appoint him in a football capacity again in any soon order. But also, I think it reflects what's going on at Man United. They can all clap and say that they got. When we sat and said, "Look, Ratcliffe hasn't bought the Glazers out; he's bought into their project," and they've found a patsy with a pot of money to come in and play the bad guy and make all these terrible decisions, from trashing concessions, putting single tickets up to 66 quid, firing staff left, right, and centre, and making quote unquote economies. And all of that. They found a willing guy to be a fall guy in the middle of that. And I think, I do think it's, well, like I say, I take no pleasure in it, but what an absolute mess of a situation, and what a mess he's made of his career.
In the words of Winter Davies, oh dear, how sad. Never mind. Yeah, that's honestly, he was on gardening leave longer than he was in that position at Man United. And I like Spenny's comment actually in the chat. Five months gardening, 5 months mopping water up. It's a strange one, isn't it, Stu? How life can come round and kick you in the backside every now and then.
Yep. I, like many thousands of Newcastle United supporters, would have had a very wry smile on the face when that news broke this morning. And karma works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? So I don't want to spend too much time talking about Dan Ashworth. I heard a rumour that because of the storm, his garden was getting knackered, so he has to leave so he could go back and fix it, and they've granted his wish. There's the other rumours that he wasn't happy with the appointment of the new manager, and he wanted Southgate, and for that, for me, would be a sackable offence in the first place. But he did the dirty on us, and he went there. Their fans gloated, saying he's went to a bigger club. They can attract the best, etc., etc. And look what's happened. So let him. I don't even want to be nasty or sarcastic or anything. Dan Ashworth left us and thought he was going to bigger and better things. He didn't, and he hasn't.
No, certainly hasn't. Good question from Lee. He said, well, is the squad rebuild bigger than we think? He says, due to the age of some of the players in the team and those that are going to be out of contract. It's a good question, Mitch. And, obviously 2 windows, January and the summer coming up. And there is going to be lots of ins and outs.
We've got players up for contracts at the end of this season as well. Yes, I think one of the things we banged on about on number of shows over the last couple of years was about squad management. And I think that's exactly the point Mitchell was making when his words got taken as an attack on Eddie in particular. I don't think the squad's been particularly well managed. Let's be brutally honest. We went into the Champions League game against Paris Saint-Germain with a centre-back pairing that were promoted from the Championship.
Yeah.
All of that needs looked at and refreshed. I don't think there's any other club in the Premier League is held on to certain players. And some of that lack of headroom in PSRs because we've held on to certain players and because we've kept certain people around and we've had difficulty letting them go. We're still paying Isaac Hayden. And he's nowhere near the squad. In fact, I don't know where he is at the minute. And so, yes, it's a big job. Yes, I think that's why they're going to be frugal in January as well. I think that's exactly why any talk of anybody incoming on January will be financed by outgoings because they need to keep everything in the pot for the summer when I think we will see a bigger, churn. And we need it in every department, really. I, at this moment in time, wouldn't be unhappy to see every goalkeeper shipped out of the 5 that we have. And a rethink in the goalkeeping room. There's certain players we've got big decisions to make on. And it's part of the PSR conundrum. It's part of the frustration. But we've been very, very poor sellers. Very poor sellers over the last few weeks. And that's all part of it, isn't it?
Stu, thoughts?
The squad needed a drastic overhaul and we were restricted, so there was different choices that need to be made. Do we go and improve the first 11 or do we do the squad? Do we try and spin too many players at the same time? The first window was ultimately get experience in of willing players who were able to help us stay up. And if you add Trippier, who wanted to come home, the splash of class, then we got Bruno when other teams were looking at him but not willing to take a risk on him. Then we had the stalwarts, the targets, the Burns. They come in, and we talked about at the time phase 1 players, phase 2 players, phase 3 players. We haven't been able to replace these phase 1 players. It all goes back to the same thing. If you're Alexander Isak, who for me is irreplaceable, for me he's the last person you want to leave. But if you were him, blame him for what to leave currently. You know, he's isolated at times. He's not getting support at times. So regarding the transfer window, it's going to happen every time there is a window. And this gets back to the lack of activity over the last 2 windows, in and out. For me, that's the unforgivable part. And sometimes you've just got to take what's given, get people off their wage book, show people. I think there's too many players in that squad now in the comfort zone knowing that they can't be moved out. And irrespective of what we all think, because we just watch them once, occasionally twice a week, they are human beings. We are at work. You know, if you're in your job and you think you can't get sacked, you think you're secure, does your performance always maintain 100%? Well, if you think your job's under review, you start putting the extra graft in. And that is human nature. And we have to have, I wouldn't say a cleansing, but there has to be an upward turn on who we're bringing in. But that, again, is restrictive. So I'm now beginning to think whether there'll be a reaction from our paymasters where they're going to say, right, I'll tell you what, Forest managed to get points back. That Everton managed to get points back. Leicester managed to get points back. Take us on now, because there will be a stage where they've invested so much money into this. If they feel that they can't get money back, they're not going to sell. I genuinely don't believe they'll want out, because that would be egg on their face, and it's something that I don't think would be acceptable to them. They will not leave Newcastle United until they've made genuine profit on it. But when they're not allowed to make that profit, I think that's where we get back into the realms of courtrooms instead of football pitches. And I don't think it's too far now. So I think this window could be very, very telling. And I think they will back Eddie Howe. And I would like to think they back Eddie Howe, because to be successful, you need a plan, and you need a group of people with the brains, the foresight, the ability to set out a roadmap and say, bear in mind, success isn't a straight line. So there will be bumps in the road. There will be corners you have to turn, and cul-de-sacs you'll go down and come back. But we will ultimately achieve success. I think there's been a rethink from not just the owners, but the fan base, that is going to take longer than anticipated, longer than we wished. But we will get there. But if you've got a group of people together, call it Mitchell, Howe, Eels, whoever replaces Eels, Silverstone, Ramayan, all of them, they're all sitting there. They've had the meetings in big posh castles and everything else. So this is why I don't think they've got any knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, well, we'll get rid of this person. The one person that they need to be listened to, because the one person that drives the success of Newcastle United is the football manager. Because a successful team you can build on. An unsuccessful team, a team that chops and changes as managers, as people are suggesting, there's no, I still can't think of a manager that would come in and get more out with that squad. But I think that squad needs a facelift. Not the only thing looking at me in this camera, but at the same time, the squad needs a facelift. And if you've got all these brains together saying, this is our roadmap, this is what we're going to do, let's start putting it into practice. And the man who is capable of achieving big results, in my opinion, is Eddie Howe, hasn't been supported through whatever excuse or reasons or things you want to point your finger at. He hasn't been allowed to put his master plan in place, to put the team in place. And 1 minute we need a new goalkeeper, then we need a right winger, then we need a centre half, now we need an attacking midfielder. Now the left winger's not happy, so we need another left winger. We'll sell this one, sell that one. There's so much noise. And what we need is a bit of calmness. And hopefully this coming window will show how much they support Eddie Howe. Because it's all right me saying if I was him, but if I was him and I wasn't back this window, I would drop the minute. I'd say, there's me notice. That's 3 windows in a row you haven't backed me. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be your fall guy. I'll be on my toes. That for me would be the credible and manly thing for Eddie Howe to do. So I just hope they do back him.
Lots of people talking about youth. Williams said would greatly help if we could lean on the academy for help. Hashtag free Lewis Miley. It's a conversation I had this morning with somebody who, who's a Newcastle fan, Mitch, and I was saying, maybe that's the way forward. For Howe, if he does manage to stay and keep his job, maybe bringing in one or two of those young players. I mean, Alfie Harrison is apparently doing great things. I mean, yes, it's a completely different level, of course, but we had Sanusi, of course, at the start of the season, and the pre-season friendlies had shone a little bit. Not the finished article by any means, but then you also have the young fullback Murphy as well. You've got players who could knock at the door and being involved, maybe around the squad. We can't sign players. We haven't been able to sign players because of PSR, but sometimes it's just that different character in the dressing room. And I'm not saying go full on, bring 2 or 3 in, but almost just giving them that opportunity, have them in and around the first team,
Would they do any less than what Almiron did when he came on yesterday if they were sat on the bench? I don't think so. Look, I get it, and it's certainly development and the pathway to the first team is something that's been missing from our academy for a while. We've got some players there now who genuinely can, and it worked well when we absolutely had to, when we had no choice with Bailey. And it's to prevent a situation where you have no choice is what Bunce has brought in for, going back to that point. I certainly would have no objection to see them sitting on the bench and to bring, you're right, in terms of different attitude in the squad and lift the squad if that's what's needed. But it always seems like Eddie goes back to people he trusts, and he tends to trust experienced players rather than youngsters more often than not.
Yeah. People are saying, he's got youngsters there but never uses them, Stu. I mean, it's just that injection of maybe something in the dressing room. And I mean, the enthusiasm of a young kid sometimes can change things. We've seen it with Lewis Miley. It was thrust onto us last season with the injuries. But, sometimes bringing somebody into the playing squad, and sometimes, they hit the ground running. You never know. You find a diamond, and Alfie Harrison is one that is mentioned time and time again.
Well, Alfie Harrison hasn't even been starting in the under-21s for most.
Played a few games this season though, and I know somebody who watches them. Obviously, NUFC.com go to watch them, and they've said he has been okay. So maybe it's just getting him involved in the dressing room and being part of it. That's the kind of thing that I'm thinking of.
I didn't say that as a slight on Alfie Harrison. What I'm saying is, at the moment, we don't have the luxury of, or there's a phrase I'm trying to think of, but a conveyor belt like Liverpool have, like Arsenal have, like Manchester City have, of top Chelsea have, top quality youths. We're trying to build that, and that will take time. But ideally, that will be the way to go. But if they're not showing it on a regular basis, and again, it's consistency. You've got to stand out in the under-21s. You can't just be a good player. You've got to stand out in the under-21s to get called up. And I would love it. Stealing Keegan's phrase, I would love it if we managed to get 2 or 3 come through and got blooded and made the names, because it is crying out. And there's one name that I'm thinking of spinning around in my head, Sanusi.
Yeah.
That was a joke, spinning around. Sorry, thank you.
I saw it.
Thank you. But he impressed.
Always comes out in the wash.
Yeah, it does. I'm going to get hung out to dry now, aren't I, for that one? So he impressed in his little pre-season roles. Could he have done worse than Mickey coming on yesterday? And there's so many questions you can ask, and we could name just about all the under-21s. But if there was a player like Miley was, stood out head and shoulders like Anderson was this season or the year before that, then they will get the chance. But yeah, I understand sometimes Eddie goes back to the well, and again it goes back to being too loyal. For me, I wouldn't have put Miggy on the pitch, and I really wouldn't have. simply because you're just giving him a little sniff that he's still got a chance. He has to know he's got no future at Newcastle United, and then reluctantly accept it or not, move on in January. We need to be more brutal, we need to be harsher. And if it means picking someone from the under-21s in front of him, then so be it. Because Eddie's a nice guy. One of my favourite horses ran by Eric Olsen was called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and he has to turn into that. He's got to turn into Incredible Hulk instead of being David Banner all the time. Occasionally, not all the time, but he's got to do it. And he has to then turn around and for me, he has to make these hard decisions and not force people out, but show them that there's no future. And if people are still happy to sit on a salary and not get game time, then you don't want them in your squad anyway. Then you start banishing them. And if it means we're losing out on the transfer fee, we're freeing up squad. We're freeing up squad places, we're freeing up wages, and sometimes we're going to have to be a bit more cutthroat. And it's a sad indictment of where we're sitting at the moment, because I think in an ideal world, we would have been where Amanda would have liked us to be now. And we would have been challenged at the top four. But the more we say we're only 2 points away from the top four, we're now 4 points away, we're 5 points away, we're 6 points away, 7 points away. The last time I looked at the league table, there's a 3-point gap, and we've got the worst goal difference between us and 8th. Unless we start winning, that gap's just going to get bigger, and the gap below us is going to get smaller, and we'll be looking over our shoulder instead of in front of us. So we'll bring our youth in. The exuberance of youth, could it work? It possibly could, but it could blow up in his face as well. And thankfully, it's not us that's making the decisions. But sometimes Eddie could be too rigid. If that's criticism, he can't be too stuck to his ways. But I get that, because that's got him to where he is. But to get to the next level, he's got to work with what he's got. And he can only polish so many turds into diamonds. Maybe we should give him some more diamonds instead of expect them to do the work. Let's help him out a bit. That's my message. Give him the help that he needs.
Yeah, good stuff. Good way of rounding the programme off. That 90 minutes has flown over tonight. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to the moderators. Thanks to everybody asking the questions. 1,060 currently watching, so that means there's 660 of you watching on Twitter tonight. Thank you very much for your time. Please go onto YouTube, search NUFC Matters, and just hit the subscribe button. And those of you who are already subscribed, hit the bell and hit all notifications. If you do that, you will get notified when the show comes on. We do 7 shows a week. We are back tomorrow night, 6 o'clock with the Fans Forum. But thanks, everybody, for watching. Stu, Mitch, take care. See you on Wednesday. But Jodie's here. Jodie's there.
Cheers. Speak soon.